Hi everyone, thanks for coming to this workshop. We are going to be talking about the healthcare needs of children in foster care. We are really lucky to have Judge Pamela Abernathy, who will be speaking today. She's an expert in the field and has prepared some really good material for you. We hope to be able to get through it all, but we may not be able to get through everything, but it will be available on the website. And you have a very handy tool to use when you go back to reviews, the checklist that's in your material. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Judge Abernathy and she can get started. And by the way, if you have any questions, just write them down and wave them and I'll come and pick them up. We hope to have some time at the end so that we can answer questions.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave. I'm not really an expert in the field, but I really care about this issue of child well-being. So I want to ask you a question. When was the last time, well, I won't put it that way. How many of you have held a little baby in the last, I don't know, let's say 3 years? Raise your hand. 5 years? 10 years? Keep your hands up. Anyone who held a baby in the last 10 years? 20 years? Okay, now, 20 years, even 20 you can remember. So close your eyes for a minute, hold that baby. You holding him? You smelling them? Okay. That feeling you just had is the feeling I want you to have when you are asking questions of DHS in your reviews about the health of the children. That's the feeling I want you to have. You know that stand in front of a train feeling you have when you held that baby? You know that wish for everything best in his or her life when you held that baby? That's the passion, that's the feeling I want you to have when you talk about child well-being. When you talk about, and medical care, of course, is the foundation of that. And I know that you do that already. I'm not, by asking you to do that, suggesting that you're not doing it now. So, healthcare needs, of course, are physical and dental and mental health. And when we talk about kids under 3, we're talking, of course, about the social and emotional development of the child, as well as the physical development of the child. And what I'm hoping to do today is that you understand the characteristics of the children coming into care and why your monitoring is so critical. And what I want to do is kind of go very quickly over the law, the administrative rules, and the policies so you know what the underpinning is. You don't have to memorize all that. I just want you to see it so you know that everything you're doing in the review is based in law, administrative rule, or policy. So if somebody pushes back on you, you can say, excuse me, no. All of this is rooted in law, administrative rule, or policy. And while we're going to go quickly, I want you to turn to this CRB healthcare checklist, because what I did was try to get all of this down on a few pages. So you can let all this stuff wash over you, but know that you have this checklist and that this checklist is rooted in law, administrative rule, and policy. I also want to talk to you about what the coordinated care organizations that are just coming online hopefully will do to improve the continuity of care for kids in care. And then at the end of the day, I want you to be real advocates for using this checklist and asking these questions in your reviews, and especially with respect to 2 very vulnerable populations, the kids at the beginning and the kids at the end. The kids under 6 and especially under 3. And there's been a lot of talk lately, I know, in training you've had about kids aging out. Of course, I contend if we do it right on the front end and during it, we're not going to have to place so much emphasis on what's happening when the kids are aging out. But that's a different lecture. But this isn't a lecture. This is a chat. I also, to the extent you have time in your busy lives, that you might be inspired to read some of the resource materials. And this is the key resource material. I was lucky enough to sit on the American Academy of Pediatrics task force for a short time when they were putting together this manual. And this is a wonderful resource, Fostering Health care for children and adolescents in foster care. And if you want to do more reading, this is a great place to start. So who are these kids? I think you know them, but let me give you some statistics. So in 2008, 40% of Oregon children in foster care were under age 3. And I'm sorry I didn't find an updated stat, but I don't think that's changed much. I suspect it hasn't changed much, but don't quote me on that. But it does argue for why we ought to be paying a lot of attention to the infants and toddlers that come before us in the reviews. In a Utah study I found, and I can't imagine that kids in Utah are all that much different from kids in Oregon, 35% of kids in care were overweight or obese, 30% needed specialty care for a physical problem, and 35% were on psychotropic meds. No, these are kids generally. Yeah. Yeah, the first bullet is that 40% of Oregon kids are under 3. And then what you probably already know is that early childhood tooth decay is rampant in the U.S., with children of poverty most affected. So we have our work cut out for us. This is from Dr. Shadi Hashfar, who found, this is nationally, 60% of kids in foster care have a chronic medical condition. 1/4 suffer from 3 or 4 chronic health conditions. Roughly 35% have significant oral health problems. Nearly 70% of children in foster care exhibit moderate to severe mental health problems. And 40 to 60% are diagnosed with at least one psychiatric disorder. Just off slide for a minute, anybody heard about the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences? Some of you have. Well, in the ACEs study, a bunch of healthy, I think it was men and women who were members of Kaiser Permanente in Southern California, were given this study about adverse childhood experiences. And Dr. Filady has come up, this ACE study is now being applied across the country in various contexts, most particularly child welfare. Bottom line, very quickly, is what the ACE study found is the more adverse childhood experiences you express or have experienced, the more your physical health is affected later in life. So it's not surprising, given that data, that these kids in care, who by definition have suffered many adverse childhood experiences, right? Separation from parents, the toxic stress of neglect or abuse, the stress of being placed in care, of moving in care, being separated from siblings, et cetera, et cetera. So our kids really are vulnerable and really need our special attention to their needs. So kids in care also need attention paid to continuity of care. We just talked about kids moving from place to place, unfortunately. We all wish, don't we, if they had to be removed, that they'd go to one place in the arms of a loving grandmother or grandfather and never leave again. Some cases are like that, but unfortunately we know the other cases. I got a Facebook request. I just joined Facebook. I know, I'm very late. I wanted to post pictures of my daughter. You'll see many pictures of her, by the way, as we go through. But I want to post some pictures of her birth online. She's 5.5 now. And so I'm on Facebook now, and 2 days ago I was sitting in the National Child Welfare Conference, and I got a Facebook request from Savannah. And Savannah is a kid who I did very badly by as a juvenile court judge. And she had 7 placements. And that's the kind of case that breaks your heart. I'm glad Savannah wants to be my friend. I friended her right back. But continuity of care for kids like that is very critical. Medication management for kids is very critical. Focus strategies to address those prevalent conditions for kids in care is critical. And as I said, special attention to those issues and groups that need special attention. So the foster family needs information upon placement and after disruption or return to care. The biological family needs information. The family who's seriously considering adoption, the family upon adoption, and the youth upon aging out. Now, that need for information is supposed to be met by child welfare, but that doesn't mean that the CRB can't ask, what have you done to prepare if we're about to return home? What have you done to share specifics about health needs with the biological parents? If the child has chronic or special health needs, what have you done then to train or help that parent learn how to meet those health needs? With respect to kids aging out, I think most of you are probably familiar with the Foster Children Bill of Rights, which provides a specific mandate for information. And any child over 14 has the right to be provided with written information within 60 days of placement or any change of placement about how to obtain medical, dental, vision, mental health services, or other treatment, including services and treatment available without parental consent under state law. So what state law says is if you're over 15, you can consent yourself to medical and dental care. And if you're over 14, you can consent yourself to mental health and substance abuse. So those are important things to remember. So again, I want you to refer to this as we quickly go through the law, but basically this column on the left-hand side is at least Abernethy's version of what I think is required. It's been vetted by Dave, so we think it's right. And the right hand is stuff I think you should be asking. Now, you don't have to ask all the right hand stuff in every case, but I hope anytime you have a child under 3 that you're at least asking those supplemental questions. So, what does Oregon law require? 418.325 goes through what examinations are required, so just know that the list is in law. Examinations are in law. So if you get any pushback on, oh, I don't have that scheduled yet, or, you know, there's many a slip between cup and lip, says the caseworker as their excuse, you can say, and I think it's not reasonable. I think it's not a reasonable effort to miss these things that are mandated by state law. Why? Well, if you're supposed to make reasonable efforts to return it, this is my opinion. I'm not a Court of Appeals judge. Thank the Lord, because the law would be all screwed up if I were. But look, if you miss this very important issue with respect to health care, if DHS misses a very important issue, something as basic as getting you to your examinations, and you're supposed to make reasonable efforts to return the child home. If the child is deteriorating in your care, meaning DHS care, DHS being the legal guardian and legal custodian of that child, then the deteriorating child is going to be more difficult to return home. That's my theory. Because a parent is less likely to be minimally adequate to meet the needs of the now deteriorated child than that parent could have been to meet the needs of a child without that. All right. So 418.325 again goes through the basics. Within 90 days of obtaining guardianship over a child under 6, the child caring agency shall provide for inoculations, various tests, including vision and hearing, very important one, sickle cell anemia, effects of rubella, effects of parental venereal disease, and the hereditary or congenital effects of parental use of drugs or controlled substances. So on my checklist, I put as optional under subsection 2B, is there a reason to suspect that the child has fetal alcohol or drug effect? What is the specialized plan to meet the child's needs? But I can already see that I've made a mistake. Because really, if 418.325 requires that within 90 days of obtaining guardianship, the child caring agency shall provide that for a child to be examined for their hereditary or congenital effects of parental use of drugs or controlled alcohol, then I think that that ought to be moved over to the left-hand side. See how fun it is to actually read the law? You go, oh, yeah. Because when I did a study, when I was a juvenile court judge, I thought, how many of these kids actually have fetal alcohol effect? Because I thought it was important, especially as a delinquency judge, to understand what I call the can't, won't line, right? It's not that I won't do what you tell me, Judge. It's really that I can't, right? So it's important to know what are they capable of and what are they refusing to do. And with fetal alcohol, there's many, 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 many things that children just aren't capable of. Same thing, frankly, is true for kids who've been subjected to toxic stress. But we're not going to go there very deep, all right? But when we did a study in our community of how many people knew about and understood how to adapt and provide services for kids with somewhere on that fetal alcohol spectrum disorder spectrum, we found that the resources weren't there very much. So you may have to do some digging if you have a kid like this and you have a review with respect to a kid like this, and keep asking and asking and pushing until that kid gets connected to somebody who understands FASD, understands how to meet the needs of that kid, and help also the care provider get some training with respect to that. So a child caring agency, that is DHS, is supposed to record the results of all those tests and put them in the health record. The health record is supposed to be available to natural parents and foster and adoptive parents. And the DHS, under supervision of a physician, is supposed to explain to adoptive parents certain things. We don't need to worry about that right now. Now, 419B346 covers kids with serious or chronic health needs. And these are probably going to be quite a few kids that come before you. As we looked at those statistics, I think that's fair to assume. So, here's the thing to remember. If the child is in need of special treatment by reason of a physical or mental condition, the department's supposed to prepare a plan for care or treatment within 14 days. 14 days of assuming custody of the ward. So, 6-month review, that's going to be a long time after 14 days. If that hasn't happened, then you might suggest that there be an immediate court hearing, so it shall happen. Immunizations. There's a case that I cite later in the materials about the department's right to immunize a child over which the agency has custody and guardianship. That case just got confirmed, and bottom line, the department has the authority to immunize even if the parents object. There's no constitutional right or other right of the parents to object or override the agency's authority, and I think that's good to know, because I read or heard on NPR, I think that Vermont and Oregon have the highest rates of children who are not getting immunizations. And as the mother of a child just about to enter kindergarten, that worries me. But that suggests to me that perhaps you may find kids who are now in the legal custody and care of DHS who have not ever received an immunization. And they're going to have to be immunized with the whole panoply. Now, you should know that in the DHS policy manual, there's actually an appendix. It's Appendix 4.11, and this appendix actually spells out for workers and for you, if you want to access it, exactly what immunizations are required and when. So, very important, and there's a tool for you. And it says, Go to my next one. Oops. Charts are provided in your materials. What we've done is provide you with the paper copy of the checklist, but everything else is online. So we could have a whole hour or 3 or 4 on psychotropics. How many of you have already been to a training about psychotropic meds? Just some of you. Okay, well, those of you who've been know that this is a deep subject. It's a very important subject, especially if you recall those stats about kids with the number of kids in care who are on psychotropic meds. But this is the important thing to remember. If the child has 2 or more prescriptions, or if the child is under 6, okay? So we need to take care with particular care for children under age 6 or those who are taking more than 2. We need specified follow-up and monitoring by the department. And there are special rules, regulations, policies, and procedures with respect to psychotropic meds. And posted online is a resource for you. An entire, see if I can show you a hard copy of it. Well, I can't find it right now, but an entire resource guide about the use of psychotropic meds. So your job as a CRB, as we recommend in the checklist, if you look over to subparagraph 9, is the child under age 6 or prescribed more than 2, has a licensed professional made an annual review, and then if you look at 9A, what are these needed for? Were you able to obtain an accurate medical, behavioral, and psychological history from parents or past providers? What else has been tried? What other modes of treatment and intervention will also be provided? Who will monitor use? What are the possible side effects and how will they be handled? Is a second opinion warranted? So those are some of the kinds of questions that you can ask, and this is your statutory authority for asking. So DHS policy, of course, is founded upon the statutory law that we just went through. Some of this, of course, then incorporates the law I already talked to you about, so we'll just kind of go through it really quickly. But just know that within 30 days there's supposed to be an initial medical plan. The child welfare case plan should also address the level of involvement of a child's parents in the child's medical care. Now, just to editorialize a little bit, I think it's great to have parents involved in the child's medical care. Why wouldn't you want the parent involved in the child's medical care? If the parent is safe enough, in other words, not, psychotic on meth, to go and attend the doctor's appointment, why not bring the parent up? Why not be there to help the parent start to be a responsible guardian of that child's health? DHS is also supposed to get the child screened between 14 and 20 days out of care. Out of home. So you should inquire, what were the results of that screening? What were the recommended services? What were the identified healthcare needs? What referrals were made to services and further assessments, and who's following up on those? In this business, in my experience, it's not so much getting them to the first one, it's getting them to the follow-up. Is that your experience? Yeah. Because there's nobody, everybody thinks somebody else is doing it in many instances, right? Right? So who's on point? Who is on point? So we've talked about regular preventative care, immunizations, timely exams, timely treatment of non-emergency injuries, ongoing care for serious or chronic conditions, and emergency treatment. Caseworker is supposed to get the immunization records, get the routine care, review the current health conditions, medications, health care providers, etc. with the foster parent. So that's important. That link is really important. That bullet. Caseworker, you ask in the review, did you I mean, I know this seems like duh, but somehow it doesn't get done, so that's why I emphasize it, right? Did you sit down with the foster parent this month? Did you talk about psychotropic meds? Did you talk about child under 3, social emotional development? Did you talk about, for a child who's 15, perhaps? Did you talk about, dare I say it, sexual activity, right? What we don't want is a foster kid who's 15 to get pregnant. All right, I'll stop there. Dangerous topic, I suppose. So the foster parent, as you probably know, is supposed to keep a foster home individual child medication log. The caseworker is supposed to review that and file it and direct questions to the personal care nurse coordinator that DHS has in Salem. The caseworker is also supposed to compare the child's current health information and standard height and weight growth charts that are in an appendix and bring significant variations to the standardized norms on the growth charts to the attention of the supervisor. So that's a proxy for physical development, right? And anything that is a deviation from the norm is the caseworker is supposed to alert the supervisor. So I suggest that's something that you ought to be monitoring too. These are documentation responsibilities. And then with 0 to 5, the foster parent is supposed to be referred to WIC. Good question to ask. For teenagers, explore the need or interest in family planning and appropriate referrals with a child 15 or older. And provide any child with referral to an appropriate family planning resource when requested. In a blue moon, they're going to ask their worker, right? They're going to ask their friend, but nonetheless. Decisions regarding a pregnancy and related medical care are the statutory right of the child 15 years or older. So kids with serious needs, there are special policies about those. They require a written plan to be made within 14 days from the date of custody, as we saw in 419B346. It's supposed to have a statement about the condition and then a very specific plan for meeting those treatment needs. The court or CRB may request regular progress reports once the plan is implemented, and the caseworker must annually report to the court about the child's progress. If the plan is revised, the caseworker must prepare a report to the court of the revision of the plan and the reasons for the revision. So if you have a kid with serious or chronic needs, then additional reporting requirements. So we went over the statutes with respect to psychotropic meds. These are the also the OARs. Here's some national stats. About 50% of the children in Medicaid who were prescribed psychotropic meds received no identifiable accompanying behavioral health treatment. Wow. The site for that is below. December 2013, Faces of Medicaid. No accompanying behavioral health treatment. Just drug them. Just drug them. Has that been your experience? Yeah, mine too. everyone's worried about, how to find, get contact with a psychiatrist to change the meds, but nobody's particularly worried about the accompanying behavioral health treatment. So here's what CHCS recommended: expand access to appropriate and effective behavioral health care. Invest in care coordination. Ensure collaboration across child-serving systems. So the good news is that Oregon is in its second year of a technical assistance grant through the Centers for Health Care Strategies for oversight of psychotropic medication for foster children. That's a mouthful. But as part of this grant, DHS has formed a psychotropic medication advisory committee. It meets quarterly, and it consists of private health care providers, mental health providers, foster parents, former foster youth, Medicaid partners, and child welfare. And the committee identified 3 primary issues to be reviewed: informed consent, communication and education, and improving prescribing practices. Child welfare also jointly contracts with the Oregon Health Authority's Children's Mental Health for weekly consultation with a child psychiatrist, and procedures are in place that allow field staff to consult with an on-staff registered nurse for medication-related issues. The department has expanded its oversight model with annual review of psychotropic meds of children in foster care. Currently, all children on psychotropic meds receive an annual medication review by a registered nurse during the month of their birth. All children under 6 receive a review by the consulting psychiatrist. Metabolic monitoring is also addressed during the review process for those children taking antipsychotic medication. So DHS is focusing on this issue, and that's great news. Dental care. How many of you routinely ask about dental care? Or let me put it this way: how many workers routinely bring up dental? Do they? Yes? Yeah, it's in the case plan, but does anybody talk about it? Okay. All right, good. I remember when I was with the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges meeting, and we were passing out toothbrushes, and this is some years ago, and it seemed to me from that meeting that really nobody was monitoring the dental care of kids. So I'm really glad to hear your answer. I know it's in the case plan, but there's lots of stuff in the case plan, so good for you for going over it. Mostly I'm concerned, as I know you are, about those kids coming into care and getting to the dentist. So I'm hoping that that's happening. You see that the referral is supposed to be within the first 30 days of placement. And I imagine a lot of those kids coming into care have never seen a dentist in their life. It'd be interesting for us to do a study, wouldn't it, of what the results are comprehensively of the state of kids' teeth coming into care. I think that would be really interesting. Because I know you've probably all learned as parents, from dentists that, dental health is integrally related as part of physical health. So if your teeth are falling apart, you're not going to be too healthy. I've seen a lot of kids over the years with really bad teeth. The bad news, of course, is Medicaid funds only cover orthodontia for kids with cleft lip and cleft palate. I know in our community we've found some orthodontists to do some work for free, so maybe that's possible. But there are flexible funds that can be considered if needed as part of treatment for a medical condition or because the medical condition resulted as a part of dental conditions, and you'll see a list of those there. But just getting your teeth pretty because it'll make you feel great about yourself is probably not part of the deal. So mental health services. Ooh, mental health services. We talked a little bit about the ACEs study, which really isn't technically part of this. And we talked a little bit about toxic stress, which is technically not part of this, but that's the reason why kids in care really need to be referred within 60 days for a mental health assessment. Now, older kids hate this, right? Don't they? Is that your experience? Because they feel labeled. They feel icky about this. And you can help normalize that with them, you know? Just like putting a Band-Aid on. Just like putting a Band-Aid on. Or I used to say for kids that were actually already maybe having to do some mental health related treatment, I would analogize to people with diabetes. You know, they learn to give themselves shots, they learn to monitor what they eat. Same thing with you. You can control this, make it part of your life, make it your own. Nobody has to know about it. Just live it. But please, 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 let's make sure that they're doing their job. 60 days of placement. This is old data, and I have some information that DHS is getting better at this, but 2007 data demonstrated that as few as 26% of children over 3 received a mental health assessment within 60 days of placement. Yikes. So this is what the services are supposed to include. If all recommended services are not available in the community, consult with the mental health provider to prioritize services. Recommendations and services are supposed to be documented in case notes. And we won't go through what the CASI does, but know that there are instruments to define what level of services are necessary. So here are stats that I found in the DHS Title IV-B Annual Progress and Services Reports Fiscal Year 2013. You'll see October to January 2013, the timely referral rate was 68%, so that was a lot better than the 2007 one. Then the assessments, 46% within 60 days. And then you'll see the comparisons with the same time period in 2011. So we were better in 2012, 81%, than we were in 2013. And they say the decrease during this quarter coincides with the new implementation of the CCO model in Oregon. Huh. I guess that means everybody was confused and so we couldn't do it right. I don't know. But I'm going to talk a minute about CCOs and how they're supposed to get things better. So hopefully this is just the transition period, and we'll get back up to where we were in 2012, timely referral rate, and hopefully bring up those rates of assessment. I'm not going to talk about special evaluations, but no, if something weird is happening, DHS does have the means to, oh, I am talking about it. I just said I wouldn't. They can get an expert eval to get more information. I think this might be especially important. Remember, we were talking about kids with FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. An expert evaluation would be warranted, and especially somebody to provide a plan, an adaptive plan for that child. None of these children are child welfare clients, of course, because they're all Rose Elizabeth Abernethy Fletcher, who would be horrified to know that she's in the bathtub on an Allied video film, but you know, she looks cute. We used to sing One Singular Sensation during this bath time. But how do we do better by babies? So doing better by babies I could speak of for about 10 days. I know you all care about it because you just told me how you felt about that baby you held in your arms. But here's the thing to remember, and you must mandate it, and you must be tough about it. Every child under 3 is required by federal law to be referred to early intervention for a developmental screening within 30 days of being placed in substitute care. 30 days. 30 days. Now, you're going to see it at 6 months, so you need to find out. Was it done? Most importantly, not was it done, but what happened after that? Was there an IFSP, an Individualized Family Service Plan, developed from early intervention? Usually this service is going to be provided by your educational service district. And if recommended by early intervention, the child will be referred to an infant mental health specialist for a comprehensive mental health assessment. Now, personally, I'm not the doctor, I'm not the psychologist, I'm not a mental health therapist, and I'm not an infant mental health specialist. But I believe personally that every child under 3 who is a victim of abuse or the kind of drip by drip by drip neglect, toxic stress created by neglect, needs to be in the care of an infant mental health therapist now. Now. Because now is when we have the most ability to affect and redirect or help that child's brain in ways that will not create that deterioration of physical health that we briefly mentioned with respect to the ACEs study. So, important that you ask, was the child referred to EI? Was a developmental screening done? And what was the follow-up? Now, on your checklist, you can see I have just a little bit of energy about this. So if you look at 7A, what I did in 7A was I took, there have been a variety of checklists prepared over the years by a variety of organizations, but I had one, I think, from NCJ, National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. There are a bunch out there if you Google, infant and toddlers in foster care, but this is questions every judge and lawyer should ask about infants and toddlers in the child welfare system. You now have these questions as part of 7A on your handout, and I hope you ask them every time, every time. So, this isn't Rose. This was my drug court coordinator when I ran a juvenile star court. I love the feet. Right? So this kid is one of the kids, right? And you're reviewing that kid's case. So be vigilant. Traumatized children develop attachment issues, emotional regulation issues. There are lots of kinds of modalities of treatment for these kids that an infant mental health specialist could provide. Dyadic therapy, dyad just means the mother and child, the dyad, the two, or the caregiver and child. And a word about foster parents and little kids. I think one of the things you could ask about is what's the goodness of fit, if you will, between the primary caregiver and the child? Because if you have a foster, and this often happens, I think, sometimes more with relatives than with non-relative foster parents. If you have a foster parent who's the aunt, say, if in her head she's thinking, well, gosh, I'm just your aunt, okay? Not your mom, because your mom's my sister and I love her, I know she's going to get you back. No, no, no. That aunt has to say, hi, I think you hung the moon. For now, I'm everything to you. That foster parent has to both act as if they'll stand in front of a train for that child, just like they were that child's parent. At the same time, be willing to give that child back tomorrow. Huh? Right? Oh my God, is that so hard? Yes, it's terrible, right? Aristotle said a person ought to be able to hold competing considerations in their mind and subscribe to both. That's what we ask of foster parents. But I think we need to be explicit about it with them. Because they might wonder, why do I feel so icky about this? Why do I feel so torn? Especially when it's a relative. You feel like, oh my God, I'm doing such a disservice to my brother if I act like this is my baby. But the baby doesn't know. We think visitation fixes it all, right? Well, we're increasing visitation, we're thinking. So the baby can go see the mom? No, no, no. That just keeps the baby familiar with mom. Somebody still over here on that 24/7 basis has to be doing this. You smile, I smile. You look there, I look there, right? That reciprocity, like in tennis, the return and the serve. I return, you serve. So if you're thinking, well, I'm just the aunt, right? Then I'm just going to keep you fed and clothed and housed and like that. Okay, enough of that. I'm diverging into another topic, but I can't help it. So here are the things. So there's dyadic therapy, the child and the foster parent, right? If the foster parent's having trouble with that goodness of fit, because a lot of these kids are going to have, they're going to avert their eyes. It's going to be hard to get them. Relationship-based visitation, that was a 4E waiver project where work was being done with the parent and the child during visitation. Get these kids into early Head Start. Get these kids into early Head Start. Get these kids into early Head Start. Okay, enough of that. Head Start, many of your counties have relief nurseries. Some of them are willing to take kids in care. And the Early Childhood Service Intensity Instrument, the ESCI, is a tool that these infant mental health therapists can use. So I've talked to you about the checklist. Most of that is already in 7A. I know I'm self-promoting, but there's my article, just so you know I do know something. And there's lots of stuff out there. I want to show you. This is a webinar. 0 to 3 is a national organization which devotes itself to kids 0 to 3. What a wonderful concept. So this is a good thing to watch. So I promised that I was going to tell you that help was on the way in terms of the CCOs, and that we should be able to expect, as the years ensue, some better coordination of care for our kids. But first I want to just briefly talk about the Fostering Connections Act of 2008. Most people think of this act in conjunction with kids aging out, providing better transition services, providing better education, but also a piece of this is a mandate that Medicaid and child welfare agencies create together a health oversight and coordination plan. What a beautiful notion! A health oversight and coordination plan. And they're supposed to do this in consultation with pediatricians, other experts in healthcare, and experts in and recipients of child welfare services. And the plan's supposed to be for the ongoing oversight and coordination of healthcare services for any child in a foster care placement. The OHCP, don't we love acronyms in this business? You know, Senator Winters charges people $0.25. It's probably gone up now for anybody that uses an acronym in her presence. I think we should do that. We'd be rich. So the OHCP is supposed to do what the Act said, a coordinated strategy to identify and respond to healthcare needs of children in foster care placements, including mental health and dental health needs. So Oregon doesn't have an OHCP. I think Texas is the leader in this field, that they've created an OHCP. But we've developed coordinated care organizations, and the triple aim of those is better health, better care at lower cost. That's the triple aim. And the good news for foster children is that CCOs cover the Medicaid population, which is what we're talking about. All these kids are on Medicaid. That's what CCOs are for. So every kid now is going to be in a CCO. They're designed to have one medical home for a kid, designed to use electronic medical records, and designed to coordinate all aspects of health care. So these next slides are courtesy of the Oregon Health Authority, so you know that they're absolutely real and accurate. 16 CCOs in every part of Oregon, serving 95% of OHP. So I guess there's 5% of kids that might, or some subset of that 5% might be a kid in foster care, so I misspoke when I said everybody will be in a CCO. All care, mental, physical, and dental, is held to one budget. The CCO is responsible for health outcomes. So the field's moving from fee-for-service to we're paying you for better health. This is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And even better, they get incentivized for quality, and they get incentivized for certain things, some of which affect our kids, which I'm going to get to right now. So, these are incentive metrics examples, meaning, yes, the doctor gets paid more for doing these things, and you'll see, in terms of affecting our kids, adolescent well-child visits, depression screening, developmental screening, yes, I had to put it in red, mental and physical assessments for children in DHS custody, and creating patient-centered primary care homes. So you'll hear there are lots of different, there are maybe 3 different terms nationally for this notion of a patient-centered primary care home. also called a medical home. And I'll talk about what that is in just a minute. But this is a slide about what CCOs have done already. And one of them here is develop processes that enable families to address all their child's needs at a single clinic. So this is the PCPCH. And the medical home is, I'm just going to read it, an innovative healthcare model utilized by pediatricians to provide accessible, continuous, comprehensive, patient and family-centered, coordinated, compassionate, and culturally effective care to children. The medical home is important for all children, but critically so for children in foster care, many of whom have health challenges. This is my slide, those are my words, so this is no longer what the health authority is saying, but I believe that that's true. So this is what the statute says patient-centered primary care homes are supposed to do. And you will now find that the pediatrician is going to be doing developmental screening, referring kids to doing developmental screening. And in Oregon, by the way, most of that is using the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which is done at various intervals in a child's life up to age, I think it goes to age 5. So the central staff has been enhanced, 2 new positions. Medical assistance resource coordinated are centralized staff that help caseworkers and foster parents navigate through the new CCO model. And then DHS has developed a routine consultation model regarding children, so caseworkers now have access to this child psychologist, registered nurse to enhance the medical care. So I wanted to give you an example of this working, and in Coos Bay, foster families can come to the Fearsome Clinic in the Waterfall Community Center. Anybody here from Coos Bay? Yeah, so are you familiar, Lee, with this? So we might have Lee come up and answer questions afterwards, but you raise your hand if I'm saying anything wrong here. But what I understand at Fearsome, foster kids can go and get everything done under one roof. Screenings, dentist, mental health, pediatrician. Now, do you have an education person there yet, too? Or that's in the works, right? In the works, yeah. So what a wonderful thing. Get it all done, all in one place, and because they're all there together, then coordination, conferencing, communication between professionals is possible. And the next steps, I got ahead of myself, are to add a school representative so we can look at educational and mental health and physical health all at the same time. Those are all the hallmarks of child well-being. And what Lori Judd, the field manager in Coos Bay says is, quote, the Fearsome Clinic has helped DHS meet federal requirements for timely assessments and can actually help get children with serious dental or medical needs into treatment more quickly. Is that right, Lee? So can I ask you, how long has this been going on, the Fearsome Clinic?
No, I don't know. I think the last year, I believe.
So about a year, yeah, because CCOs just came online about a year, or started to come online about a year ago. So we have about a few minutes for questions, and we were going to have a long time for this discussion, but we don't. But you heard me at the outset say, you know, you have the time, you have the structure to really do it right. Don't depend on the judge. I know I'm being taped, but don't depend on the judge to have the time. And I think you don't. I think you know that, but I'll just state the obvious again. I really relied on you to be the guardians of child well-being. ASFA, the Adoption Safe Families Act, is supposed to be about safety, permanency, and well-being. The three-legged stool. I think well-being is the short leg of it. I think well-being ought to be the stool, because if you think about it, well-being really does encompass both safety and permanency, if you think about it that way. But that's not really how it's defined. Anyway, you are the guardians of the child's well-being. And we spend a lot of time talking about what the parents are doing, how they're progressing in their plan, and I think many times eclipsing the real deal, which is, what are we doing for that child that's in our care, under our watch? What are we doing for them? Health-related case law, the primary concern in changing permanency, the permanency plan from reunification with the parent is always the child's health and safety. The next case, SM, is the one that talks about that DHS does have the authority to order immunization. Review was allowed. The Oregon Supreme Court just confirmed. This case, I know you probably don't like to read the law, but for those of you that might, this case also provides a good summary of the non-parent authority to make healthcare decisions under 419B. And the good news is that those pages talking about that really are only 2, so you might want to check it out. So look online for these other handouts. Oh, here's what I was trying to find on psychotropics. The ABA Practice and Policy Brief, Psychotropic Medication in Children in Foster Care, Tips for Advocates and Judges. And then Children's Dental Health, the Next Frontier in Wellbeing. Again, I got that from my earlier time on NCJ, FCJ, and it sounds like maybe we are in that frontier and over it. I hope that you were right. So does anybody have questions? We have little cards, but I think we could probably just answer the question. Oh, well, you have them written, so. Oh, yeah, I'm mobile. I am mobile. I wasn't supposed to walk before a certain line.
Well, I have this all written out.
That's okay. We'll start with Marcia's question. Marcia, what's your question?
Well, I was wondering about the early intervention referral and mental health referral within 30 days. Is that correct on both of those?
60 for mental health, that's for kids. Mental health referral is 60 days. Early intervention, that's through Part C of the IDEA, separate federal requirement, that's 30 days, okay?
So my question was, my experience, I guess, has been that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if a child goes to a medical doctor and they do a developmental checklist, which would happen, but there's not a referral to EI unless there's something noted that isn't meeting the developmental standards.
Well,
Would that be?
well, if there's a developmental screening done and the screening is clear, then you don't need to have EI do it.
So
EI can do, I mean, what the IDEA says is refer for a developmental screening within 30 days. So if the developmental screening is done by a pediatrician, then
that would be
we're good.
satisfactory.
Yeah.
And then the same thing for mental health. I mean, that would be my question. If no one is noticing any mental health issues, even though I liked your comment about a drop for mental health.
DHS must refer the child for a mental health assessment within 60 days of placement. I think you have to assume that there's got to be some assumptions aside, they're supposed to be referred for a mental health assessment. It's just an assessment. So
Right.
I think every kid needs to be referred for a mental health assessment. It's not some caseworker thinking, well, this kid does or doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's not they're not qualified to do that. Somebody else has to make that assessment. So.
And I just would say then I think our mental health department staff would really need to be increased. It seems like we wait for a long time for referrals
Probably
to be
true.
evaluated.
You guys can push. Okay. In other workshop findings, I was told it's not appropriate for CRB to address sex ed. You said it should be addressed conflict here. Oh, I knew I'd stepped over the line. Well, okay. I'm new here, so that's what they said. I guess you don't. So.
I think the difference was on that
Yeah.
was that
Well, thank you very much for that lifeline. Well, I think somebody needs to make sure that the topic's been addressed, not that we address the topic. So I think that's what you, thank you, Janet. That's what I'm saying, not the details. So have you discussed with Johnny, and Johnny's there, right? Have you guys discussed X? Okay? All right. Does that help? Okay. Don't go there at all?
Yeah, because I was in another workshop in Portland where they talked about how important it was and that it wasn't being addressed with particularly, the 14 and up group.
Yeah.
And that what the field manager who did the workshop I was just at before this one said was that's something that the foster parent should be doing. And so if this one says this one should do it and this one says this one should do it, and they're all assuming somebody else is going to do it, these kids are not getting the sex ed that they need. And if these kids were, they have all kinds of issues, like it's a recipe for trouble.
So here's what the policy says. Explore the need for or interest in family planning information and appropriate referrals with a child 15 years or older. So I think it's fair for the CRB to say, have you explored the need for or interest in family planning information and made appropriate referrals with this child who is 15 years or older? Have you provided this child a referral? Maybe you don't want to do that, but at least the first one, okay? And then with respect to confidentiality, because of the bottom one, decisions regarding a pregnancy and related medical, you are on a little, because of confidentiality, some of these questions might be asked outside, the 15-year-old has the right to consent. So you might suggest that this be information that you get without the parent's presence, right? But explore the need for, you can ask the neutral question. Did you explore the need for or interest in family planning information and make appropriate referrals with this child? Yes or no? I think you, and if you want the law on it, the law we went through, whoops, well, I'll find it.
Can I just interject something here for a minute?
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
I think one of the concerns is how we handle that when when the children are present, particularly. But I think if we're directing it to the caseworker, it's a lot easier to do without putting the child on the spot. And so I'll talk to your other field manager, see how we handle this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go.
It's a kid who's on APLA or going into independent living. And a lot of times the only person there is the caseworker. And when the only person there is the caseworker, and it's a lot more informal, it's a lot easier to ask it then.
Yeah. But almost everything I've said is really you to the caseworker, right? And sometimes to the foster parent. Are you doing your job? Here's what the law requires. Here's what the policy says you ought to do to implement the law. So my job here as a CRB is going to say, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? And I see no reason at all to leave out this basic question just because it's about sex. All right? You're just saying benignly, did you go to the dentist? Did you make sure Johnny got referred to the dentist? Johnny's over 15. Did you make sure Johnny is aware of or was referred to? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Good question. Child medication log. Is the caseworker required to keep it up to date? You mean the one that the foster parents have to do?
Right, and if this is for CRB board members, if we're in a review and there's some indication the child is on psychotropic medications, and we ask for some records or some substantiation of the right steps have been taken, if the caseworker does not have that information in the file, which I understand, because I'm new. I'm a new applicant to the placement on the board in Deschutes County. What would you do if there's no records in the file about psychotropic, medication reviews or the log? What would you ask us to do?
And the kid is on psychotropic?
Yes, there's indications that the child's on psychotropic medication, but there's nothing that the caseworker has in the file that can document that that there is a log or that the log's up to date.
Well, if that came to me as a judge, I'd say, we're setting this hearing over until tomorrow morning at, 7 a.m., and I expect you back here with the required information. So what's the CRB equivalent of that?
We would have to say they were non-compliant of court orders.
And then, and we would say we would demand it, we would put it in recommendation, we would make sure that the judge would know it, for the next review, but. If you don't have, and we don't have that, we can't.
Can you not set it over and have another hearing?
We could if it was really, and since it is psychotropic medicine, we could hold it over.
Yep, that's what I do.
And then make them
Yeah.
non-compliant.
Is that important? The question is it important enough for you to make sure that they get it done now versus is it important enough for you to simply alert the court that it should be done by the next review? That's the question. And with psychotropics, I think the question is now, meaning set it over, versus, hey, judge, they didn't do this. Because the judge, if it was my court, you were doing it 6 months, I wouldn't do it again until 9 months. So that'd be 3 months going with them doing a terrible job of monitoring something that's really critical.
Well, when you say set it over, what does that mean? My experience is with juvenile justice in another state,
Yeah.
and with the kids who are incarcerated, and we made a hellacious effort to make sure that we were monitoring psychotropic applications of drugs to children,
Yeah.
because we found out that the kids were being drugged down. So how
Yeah.
long would you wait? Maybe Dave, this is a question for you.
Wipe those behavioral problems,
Yeah,
sweep them under the rug.
how long would
well,
you
Dave,
wait?
Dave's going to address that, how CRBs
Yeah,
do that.
usually for us, if we set it over, it means it comes on the next month's schedule. So it's another month, but sometimes you can also, depending on when the review was, I know in Lynn County, sometimes they will ask the caseworker to bring back the documentation because they happen to meet there in the DHS office, so they'll ask them to bring it back later that afternoon if that would work. That's another possibility. Yeah, it would, yeah.
We normally do not see the log or have a copy of the log. We have the medication and the dosage, but actually seeing the log is not something we see.
It's okay. I gave you a checklist, and I'm here telling you it's based on the law. So you have, there's gunpowder in your gun, if you will. That was probably the wrong analogy. But what I want you to know is 3 things. One, the characteristics of kids in care are that kids have a lot of these medications compared to the normal population. Number 2, that Oregon law addresses it specifically and has specific requirements with respect to kids who are on 2 or more or kids who are under 6. And DHS policy is long and lengthy about how we're supposed to be monitoring, and in their most recent 2013 review that I quoted, they're trying to improve it. So all those things require that you be, very, very precise about your review of these things, that you hold them to a standard, and you've got your ducks lined up in terms of insisting on that. Just quickly, CCO medical assistance workers responsible for DHS and foster parent coordination, are parents also involved or have access? Do you mean, do parents know when the appointments are and can go, or are they helping be a resource for getting kids to, yeah?
So I think it was because on your slide it specifically called out the worker and the foster parent. And so where they were working in coordination, et cetera, and having access to it. So my question was, does that law or that organization, is it the tripod? Is it the parent as well as the foster parent as well as this worker, and how does DHS play? I guess it's like, is it all of the above or just
You mean, is the parent always
involved?
communicated with in terms of being involved with and monitoring and helping
Right.
with respect to the child? I think it depends on the case. I
Okay.
think I recommend that parents be involved to the extent that they are able to be.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in the throes of an ongoing addiction, obviously,
Correct.
that's not going to work.
Right.
But I think there'll be differences of opinion on this, but that's my opinion. I think the more we can expect of parents, even when the child is placed out of home, the more we can have them be involved in and going to these appointments, meeting the child and the caseworker there, sitting there and hearing. And because if the plan is return home, do you want a whole gap? Especially with a child with serious and chronic medical needs. I mean, do you want a gap? No, you want to be bringing this probably maybe in some cases irresponsible, immature parent. You want to be bringing them along, so that we actually know. And you also learn a lot about the parent's commitment. Sometimes you create the parent's commitment. I believe parents truly are capable of transformation, and I think the more we hold them to an expectation of what we would hold what I would hold myself to as a mother, the more they will respond in kind if they are able. I think most parents love their children. They want to do right by them. And when they get the monkey of addiction off their back, or they get proper meds for their mental health issues, they can be brought along. And I think sometimes we just say, oh, well, and we're going to take care of it over here. So that's a great question. That's my answer. You will find differences of opinion. Is the CANS assessment for a certain age? There is a special adolescent. I'm not an expert in all the screening tools, but I believe that the CANS there's a version of CANS for everybody, and it says an age-appropriate CANS screening. So that's what I know. There's an age-appropriate CANS screening. They may have different. Child adolescent needs screening is all that stands for. So there's an age-appropriate one, and I think they're all called CANS. Okay, I think that's all our questions. Thank you for your engagement and attentiveness, and good luck to you.